Precious sat in the backseat of a taxi, staring out at the busy streets of Lagos. The vibrant city hummed with life, street vendors shouting their prices, the scent of roasted plantains in the air, and the rhythmic beats of Afrobeats drifting from passing cars. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. After years of hard work, she had finally earned a major promotion at her firm. As a financial analyst, she had sacrificed sleep, endured stressful deadlines, and pushed herself beyond limits she thought possible. And now, she was ready to share the good news with her husband, Samuel. To make the moment more special, she had chosen an upscale restaurant and even invited his mother, Mrs. Williams, to join them. When Precious arrived, Samuel and Mrs. Williams were already seated. The restaurant had dim lighting, elegant decor, and the soft hum of jazz playing in the background. She smiled at Samuel, who gave her a small nod but seemed distracted. After they placed their orders, Precious finally said, "I have exciting news to share." She leaned forward, her eyes shining. "I got the promotion. All my hard work finally paid off." She expected warm congratulations, a toast, maybe even a proud smile from Samuel. Instead, silence settled over the table. Mrs. Williams's face tightened, and her lips pursed in disapproval. "A promotion?" she asked, her voice laced with something that felt more like criticism than curiosity. "And what does that mean for your home, Precious? Will you have even less time for your husband?" Precious blinked, caught off guard. "Mama, this is good news," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "It means more financial stability for both of us. Samuel and I can build a better future." Mrs. Williams scoffed. "And what about children? A woman should know her priorities." Samuel shifted in his seat, avoiding Precious' gaze. "My mother has a point," he murmured. Precious felt her stomach drop. She turned to Samuel. "You of all people know how much this means to me," she said, her voice quieter now, disbelief creeping in. "I thought you'd be happy." Samuel let out a sigh. "I am happy, but I just don't want us to lose sight of our family." "Our family?" Precious' voice rose slightly. "Samuel, we don't even have kids yet. And even if we did, that doesn't mean I can't have a career too." Mrs. Williams shook her head. "A man is the head of the house, and a wife should support her husband, not compete with him." Precious clenched her jaw. "I am not competing with Samuel. I am building a future with him." Samuel, who had been silent for too long, finally spoke. "Precious, maybe she's right. Maybe we need to rethink our priorities." The words felt like a slap. She had expected a partner, a teammate, someone who would stand by her side. But in this moment, it was clear, Samuel was choosing his mother's expectations over their partnership. The evening that was meant to be a celebration had turned into something else entirely. Precious swallowed the lump in her throat. Maybe this wasn't just about a promotion. Maybe it was about something deeper, something she had ignored for too long. The sharp sting on her cheek was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Precious lay on the cold restaurant floor, the world around her fading into murmurs of shock and disbelief. Her head spun, her breathing shallow. Samuel, her husband, the man she had trusted, had just hit her. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her fingers trembling as she touched her face. A hot tear slipped down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She wouldn't let them see her break. Not him, not Mrs. Williams, who sat watching, her expression more irritated than concerned. A heavy silence hung over the restaurant. Precious could feel the weight of 100 eyes on her, the quiet judgment, the whispers of strangers who had just witnessed what should have never happened. Samuel stood there, his hands clenched into fists, his face still twisted in anger. But in his eyes, there was no regret, no shame, just frustration, as if she had forced him to do this. Something inside Precious clicked into place. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just anger. This was who Samuel was. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the restaurant. Her legs felt unsteady, her heart pounding, but she didn't look back. She refused to. Outside, the humid Lagos night wrapped around her, thick and suffocating. She hailed a taxi, her hands shaking as she climbed in. "Where to, madam?" the driver asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. She hesitated. "Home. No, not yet." The thought of going back to the house she shared with Samuel felt unbearable. "Just drive," she whispered. The car pulled into traffic, and Precious let her head fall back against the seat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Samuel's face, his rage, his coldness, his betrayal. How had they gotten here? When had love turned into this? Her phone vibrated in her purse. She pulled it out and saw Rachel's name flashing on the screen. "Precious." Rachel's voice was sharp with concern. "I just saw a message from someone who was at the restaurant. Are you okay?" Precious swallowed the lump in her throat. "He hit me, Rachel." There was silence on the other end. Then, Rachel's voice, low and furious. "That's it. You're leaving him." Precious let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can," Rachel cut in. "And you will. You are not staying with a man who puts his hands on you. You need to get out before it happens again." The truth of those words settled deep inside her. It would happen again, and next time, it could be worse. By the time she reached her apartment, she had made up her mind. The life she had built with Samuel was over. The house was silent. Samuel hadn't called. He hadn't even come home. Precious sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank screen of her phone. No messages, no apologies, nothing. That was all the confirmation she needed. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name Rachel had sent her last night, Karen, a well-known divorce lawyer. Her finger hovered over the call button for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed it. A smooth, professional voice answered. "Hello, this is Karen. How can I help you?" Precious swallowed hard. I need a divorce." There, she had said it. Karen's tone softened. "I understand. Why don't you come in today? We can talk about your options." By the time she ended the call, her hands were no longer shaking. She was done being afraid. Done waiting for Samuel to decide her future. It was time to take control of her own life. Leaving Karen's office, Precious felt a mix of emotions, fear, relief, and something new, determination. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she had taken the first step. She refused to let fear dictate her future any longer. Back at her office in Lagos's financial district, she tried to focus on work, poring over spreadsheets and market analyses. Numbers had always made sense to her, offering a structure she could rely on. But today, even the figures on her screen blurred as thoughts of Samuel and Mrs. Williams clouded her mind. Her boss, Mr. Roberts, noticed her unusual distraction. He approached her desk and lowered his voice. "Precious, you've been staring at that screen for 10 minutes without typing a word. Everything okay?" She hesitated before nodding. "Just some personal matters, sir. Nothing that will affect my work." He gave her a knowing look. "If you need time off, take it. You've just been promoted, you deserve to focus on yourself too." She forced a smile. "I appreciate that, but work helps me stay grounded." Still, she knew she couldn't escape her thoughts forever. Sensing her stress, Rachel suggested a night out. "You need a break, Precious. Let's go out, have some fun, and actually celebrate your promotion." Precious hesitated. The idea of being around people, laughing, and pretending everything was fine felt foreign. But then she thought about it. When was the last time she truly enjoyed herself? "Okay," she said finally. "Let's do it." That evening, they stepped into the Haven, a rooftop bar overlooking the Lagos skyline. The city lights stretched out before them, a reminder that life still held beauty, even after heartbreak. The place buzzed with energy, laughter, clinking glasses, and the distant sound of a live band playing an upbeat Afro-fusion song. Rachel raised her glass. "To new beginnings." Precious smiled for the first time in what felt like forever and clinked her glass against Rachel's. The cool taste of the cocktail was refreshing, washing away some of her worries. For the next few hours, she allowed herself to enjoy the moment. They talked about work, their dreams, and the places they wanted to visit. Slowly, the weight on her chest lightened. You know what? Rachel said, leaning in. You should say yes to that conference invitation. Precious frowned. What conference? The Women in Finance event. Helen mentioned it a while ago. She wanted you to be a speaker. You should do it. Precious had nearly forgotten about the invitation. At the time, she wasn't sure she had anything valuable to say. But now, maybe she did. She sipped her drink, considering it. What if I'm not ready? Rachel shook her head. You are. You've built an amazing career despite everything. Imagine how many women need to hear your story. Precious exhaled slowly. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe this was her chance to turn pain into purpose. She reached for her phone, found Helen's contact, and typed a message. Hi Helen, I'd love to accept your invitation to speak at the conference. Let's set up a meeting to discuss it. Asterisk. She hesitated for only a second before pressing send. As she put her phone away, she felt something shift inside her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just surviving. She was moving forward. Precious stood backstage, taking slow, deep breaths. The large conference hall in Lagos buzzed with anticipation. The Women in Finance event had drawn professionals from across the continent, all eager to share experiences and insights. Yet, as she prepared to step onto the stage, doubt crept in. Would they listen? Would her story matter? Rachel, who had flown in to support her, touched her arm. You've got this, Precious. Just speak from the heart. She nodded, straightening her shoulders. The moment she stepped into the spotlight, the noise quieted, and all eyes turned to her. She started slowly, her voice steady but warm. When I began my career, I believed that hard work alone would be enough to guarantee success. What I didn't expect were the invisible battles, the expectations, the doubts, the voices telling me I had to choose between ambition and family. She saw heads nodding in agreement. Encouraged, she continued. I faced challenges, some from the workplace, others from those closest to me. But the hardest lesson I learned was this: your dreams are valid, no matter who tries to tell you otherwise. She didn't mention Samuel by name, but the weight of what she had been through was in every word. She spoke of self-worth, resilience, and the courage it takes to carve out space for yourself in a world that often tells women to shrink. When she finished, the applause was overwhelming. As she stepped down from the stage, women lined up to speak with her. Some shared their own struggles, pressures from husbands, bosses, or families. Others simply thanked her for saying aloud what they had always felt but never voiced. One young woman, Aisha, grasped her hands tightly. I was thinking of quitting my job because my fiancé says a wife shouldn't work too much. But hearing you today, I know I can't give up my dreams. A deep sense of purpose settled inside Precious. She wasn't just speaking for herself, she was speaking for them too. That night, as she and Rachel sat in a quiet cafe, the idea took shape. I want to do more than just give a speech once a year, Precious said, stirring her tea. Women need a space where they can get real advice, not just encouragement. A network where we uplift each other. Rachel's eyes lit up. Then let's build it. A mentorship program, career workshops, even legal advice for women going through what you did. The more they talked, the clearer it became, this wasn't just an idea. It was a calling. Precious threw herself into the project, reaching out to universities and finance firms. Within weeks, interest surged. Women from all over signed up, eager for guidance and community. Meanwhile, she balanced her demanding role as a senior financial analyst, legal meetings, and this growing initiative. It was exhausting, but for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. Just as she was finding her rhythm, Samuel reappeared. At first, it was small, missed calls, unread messages. Then, the voicemails came. Precious, I made a mistake. I was angry, but I never meant to hurt you. Can we talk? Asterisk. You think you're better off without me. Is that it? Asterisk. You're turning into someone I don't even recognize. Asterisk. His words swung between regret and blame, guilt and resentment. She ignored them. One evening, as she left her office, she saw him waiting by her car. Her breath caught, but she kept her face unreadable. What are you doing here, Samuel? He stepped closer. We need to talk. She crossed her arms. There's nothing left to say. His jaw tightened. So that's it. After everything we've been through. A year ago, she might have faltered. She might have softened, but not now. After everything you put me through. Yes, Samuel, that's it. His face darkened, but before he could respond, Rachel pulled up in her car. Precious gave him one last look before getting in, leaving him standing alone in the fading light. As they drove away, Rachel glanced at her. You okay? Precious exhaled. More than okay. For the first time in a long time, she was free. Precious no longer flinched when Samuel's name appeared on her phone screen. Each ignored call, each unread message, was another step toward reclaiming her peace. He had lost the power to shake her. The slap, the humiliation, the loneliness that followed, it had all carved out a version of her that no longer tolerated intimidation. Now, she was focused on what mattered. Her career, her well-being, and the growing community of women who saw her as a source of strength. She followed her lawyer's advice meticulously. Every document was filed, every necessary meeting attended. There were moments of sadness, moments where she questioned whether things could have been different. But with each passing day, the weight of her past life grew lighter. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Precious met with Rachel at a quiet cafe in Lusaka. It had become their tradition: hot ginger tea, warm pastries, and conversations about the future. Rachel took a sip of her tea and leaned forward. So, you're officially free. Precious smiled, exhaling deeply. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Rachel grinned. How does it feel? She thought for a moment. Strange. Like I can finally breathe, but I'm still learning what to do with all this freedom. Rachel nodded. That makes sense. You've spent so much time surviving, you're just now starting to live asterisk. Precious let the words sink in. Living. That was exactly what she wanted. She had already taken the first steps. The mentorship program had blossomed into something bigger than she had ever imagined. Women gathered in cozy cafes, shared experiences in online forums, and encouraged one another to rise above societal expectations. At one session, a young woman named Angela spoke about her struggles in the banking industry. I was passed over for a promotion again, she admitted, frustration clear in her voice. They said I wasn't assertive enough. But when I speak up, I'm too aggressive. I don't know how to win. Precious smiled knowingly. You win by refusing to let them define you. If they can't see your value, create spaces where you don't have to prove it. Angela's eyes sparkled with realization. Like you did. Precious nodded. Exactly. Each mentorship session left her feeling more certain that she was on the right path. Word of her work spread quickly. Soon, companies began inviting her to speak at leadership workshops. Universities reached out, asking her to mentor young women entering finance. Even international organizations expressed interest in her work. She stood on stages in Lagos, Johannesburg, and Nairobi, sharing her story, not as a tale of pain, but as a lesson in resilience. One evening, after speaking at a corporate seminar, she received an unexpected message. Mrs. Williams, I heard you spoke at a conference today. Helping women. Good for you. Asterisk. Precious stared at the screen, a mixture of shock and amusement washing over her. Mrs. Williams, the same woman who once accused her of overshadowing Samuel. She didn't reply. Some battles weren't worth fighting anymore. Instead, she placed her phone down and gazed out at the city skyline. She had once thought her life was tied to Samuel. That without him, she would be lost. Now, she knew better. She wasn't lost. She was finally home, with herself. Precious walked out of the courthouse, breathing in the crisp Lusaka air. The weight of the past had finally been lifted, the divorce was final. She was no longer bound to a marriage that had suffocated her, no longer answering to a man who had failed to respect her worth. Rachel was waiting for her outside, leaning against her car with a knowing smile. It's over, Rachel said softly. Precious nodded, exhaling deeply. It is. Rachel pulled her into a warm embrace. You did it, Presh. You chose you asterisk. For the first time in a long while, Precious felt a deep sense of peace. With her legal battle behind her, she threw herself fully into her work. Her mentorship program grew rapidly, attracting not only young professionals but also seasoned women who had faced similar struggles. She expanded her reach, setting up workshops in universities and corporate offices across Zambia and beyond. One afternoon, during a panel discussion at a leadership conference in Nairobi, a woman named Esther stood up and shared her story. I stayed in a toxic marriage for years, she admitted, her voice shaking. Because I thought leaving would mean I had failed. But hearing your story, Precious, made me realize that walking away isn't failure, it's survival. Tears welled up in Precious's eyes as she nodded. You are not alone, Esther. And you are stronger than you know. The audience erupted in applause, but more importantly, Precious saw hope in the eyes of the women before her. One evening, as she was locking up after a mentorship session, she saw a familiar figure standing outside the building. Samuel. He looked different, tired, thinner. Regret was written all over his face. Precious, he said hesitantly. She met his gaze, but there was no anger, no resentment left in her heart. Just clarity. What do you want, Samuel? He sighed. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Precious studied him for a moment. A year ago, she might have longed to hear those words. But now, they no longer mattered. I forgive you, she said simply. But I've moved on. I hope you do too. Samuel nodded, his shoulders sagging. Take care, Precious. You too. And with that, she walked away, never looking back. Precious's journey was not just about leaving an abusive marriage. It was about rediscovering herself, learning that love should never come at the cost of self-worth, and understanding that true strength lies in choosing oneself despite fear and doubt. She had once thought that marriage defined her. Now, she knew better. Her story was proof that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way forward. One step at a time, she had built a life of purpose, resilience, and hope. And that was the greatest victory of all. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories about strength, resilience, and personal growth.